The Subtle Art by Mark Manson. Welcome to my channel. My name is Samuel and I want to make self-growth normal. If you want to make self-growth normal, because I don't want to do it alone, and who doesn't want to make self-growth normal? Come on guys, then make sure to smash that like button. Mark Manson, a young, modern, self-help household name, gives us what might be one of the most iconic books of this generation. I remember his previous book, Models, totally changed my life romantically. I will never look at dating the same way again. And I reviewed his newer one, but this one is the one that really blew him up. Sold over 2 million copies its first week, and people are wondering, you know, with a title like this, is it actually good? Is it worth the hype? In short, no, it totally sucks. I'm just kidding. Or am I? Let's talk about it. In this review, I'm going to summarize the 8 chapters, some things that stood out to me, some things I learned from them. I'm going to talk about how it's different from his newer book, Everything, which I guarantee 90-something% of the other reviews of this book you see will not compare these books at all, because this book came out in 2016 and I'm reviewing it after reviewing that other one. I'm also going to talk about what the most helpful negative Audible reviews had to say about The Subtle Art, whether I agree with them, and then I'm going to read some standout quotes from the book, who I recommend it to, and lastly, similar books you might like as well. I don't curse in my videos anymore, so in this instance, let's just call this book The Subtle Art of Not Caring. Yes, it does not sound as sexy per se. I choose not to care about not cursing in my videos and the consequences of it, because allegedly, no profanity in your videos yields higher Google AdSense revenue for YouTube partners. And at least I'm honest about that. My goal for 2020 is to become a YouTube partner. I will be honest, that extra ad revenue does matter to me more than the slightly higher sense of ease and expression and supposed authenticity I would get from cursing. Maybe someday I'll do it in my videos again, I don't know. Chapter 1 is called Don't Try. A lot of self-help books ostensibly talk about wanting something that you don't have, and the author of this book talks about why focusing on getting it from this perspective of lack is not ultimately effective in getting it. There are no studies or numbers or statistics he uses to back any of this up, which is like, makes me wonder where he's coming from. Is Mark Manson just jumping to conclusions here based on observation? And how has self-help still managed to help so many people in the last several decades? And his book does seriously go against the grain, but I really just didn't anticipate saying this much about what I would change in it right off the bat until later into my listening session, when I realized that I found the beginning of this book unbearably uninformative compared to the rest. Chapter 2, Happiness is a Problem. Now, despite the quirks in the beginning, I haven't heard any other book, for example, talk about how pain has biologically helped us throughout history. And we like the idea of fixing every problem in life, but the reality is we kind of just probably can't. And the whole book really seems to sort of center around accepting this, but it does it in like the most smooth, accessible way. If you think that Buddhist perspectives are lame and boring to learn about, this book might be worth checking out. Chapter 3, You Are Not Special. I like how all these chapters are just like, they just have names, there's just like things that you don't want to hear. Some sections too. I think there's one called Kill Yourself. With this one, entitlement seems to be at an all-time high in an age where we are more connected to each other than ever. And a lot of people will argue this is the best time to be alive in human history. I definitely would. But this is just weird. The author thinks, whether it's true or not, he thinks it's because of the uprise of, I feel like I'm just about to throw a ton of random words at you here, but the uprise of media sensationalism, the outliers, celebrities at the sort of front lines, then, you know, the millennials are so lazy. Why doesn't today's generation have a good work ethic? I've been working at this supermarket for over 41 years, and I haven't gotten a raise since 1977. Millennials aren't even the youngest generation anymore. Chapter 4, The Value of Suffering. The author talks about blind spots, what he calls layers of the self-awareness onion. You know, this is kind of like if you ask someone how they're doing and they say okay, and you talk to them a little bit more and you find out in less than 2 minutes from then that their parents died last week of coronavirus while getting hit by 2 trains at the same time in the middle of Intercourse, Pennsylvania, and they have no idea what to do with their life. And that was kind of a dramatic example. He discusses values and why prioritizing what you care about being honest with is actually effective in artistically not caring about just everything else. This, in a nutshell, is what self-improvement really is kind of all about. What's interesting is that entitlement and fear and pain and priorities and I guess selective carelessness have been talked about in so many other books, but this book disguises and explains them so cleverly, so impressively, that it just feels like these ideas are very original. Chapter 5 is You Are Always Choosing. I think a big difference between this book and everything is the broad scope of what they educate us about. To put it as simply as possible, this one is more internal and that one's more external. This one is more about like individualistic values and that one is more about like values of like full demographics of people. Chapter 6 is called You're Wrong About Everything, But So Am I. This chapter and chapter 7, honestly, I feel like I've heard a lot of that stuff before. I don't know why he added them exactly. I mean, I know that they are pretty relevant to the subtle art of not caring, but not as much as the rest of the chapters, in my opinion. Chapter 7 is called Failure is the Way Forward. If any of the stuff in these books is just, you've heard it before, it is just more perspective, more ways of looking at the same things. I saw a video once about what a lot of billionaire minds have in common. I have studied quite a few of them myself, and one of those things happens to be the ability to look at just about anything from like a multiplex of perspectives. That's a really cool word. I think that's like 97.3% of the reason that I used it, multiplex. I'm 97.3% sure that I don't know what it means. So I just looked it up, and a multiplex is consisting of many elements in a complex relationship. So kind of, yeah, a multiplex of perspectives. Chapter 8, The Importance of Saying No. He talks a lot about boundaries in relationships. And I was actually surprised to be reminded how much this book talks about different values. For change, what we care about is not enough. It's not deep enough. And it didn't surprise me that why we care about it is what matters more. But what did surprise me was what exactly that entails, which the author talks about in the book. I don't want to spill all the marbles or tea. Chapter 9 is called And Then You Die. The last chapter of this book is definitely my favorite. It is probably one of my favorite chapters ever in any book I've ever listened to. It's worth easily more than the whole book. It's what I like to call an estuary in this channel. It talks about death terrors, something I had never heard of before, and how that ties into why we try so hard to put our names and faces on billboards and buildings and statues, and why we are compelled to put so much of ourselves into serving others in hopes that our conceptual selves will last in time far beyond our physical selves. This fascinates me so much, and it drives me so much, selfishly speaking. And I'd argue, just for the sake of anyone watching this and their own ambition, it's a great thing to conceptualize, no matter your age. What did the negative reviews have to say, and do I agree with them? A 2-star review called it average, saying it's a bit pointless and that the first chapter is interesting then devolves into irrelevance. I think that the first chapter is like kind of just lame compared to a lot of the rest of the book, aside from a couple points, and then it evolves into total immersion of relevance. Another 2-star review said, you know, I'm 59, I would have been more impacted by this book if I were 20 something. What about the title says, you should buy this book if you're 59 and you have a lot of life experience? Using age as a quantification for life experience and leaning different ages up against the merits, the benefits of checking this book out, you know, it reminded me a little bit of that 1-star review that called it cheap, saying it would be better to take an intro to philosophy class, as if, you know, that's a little bit more practical in everyday life. And need I remind you, less expensive. I feel like I'm being kind of negative, but I read reviews like this and just see some sort of like neo-phobic, well, you know, it's tasteless, it's cheap, watered down, new age self-help material, but I don't know, man. Success leaves clues. What about the 5-star reviews saying, I wish I checked out this book 20 years ago. It took me 2 decades to learn all of this. And I know I'm like quoting Tony Robbins left and right here, but when you read a book, you actually are compressing decades into days. Can't read? Hate reading? I really don't like reading either, but I review 2, 3, 4 books a week, because now we can pay people not just for the book, but also an actual professional recording and audio engineering of the book's reading. But you know what? Actually, don't read the book. Don't read it. Don't get it. This book, or really any best-selling books about life approaches and values, just keep waking up and learning from your own mistakes for 20 years. I don't get why that's more effective. It probably has to do with what we value, but I don't know. Maybe, I will never know. I know I may be sounding a little bit hard-headed here. That's probably what I would say if I were watching this right now, but I don't think I would disagree. Sometimes I hope I'm not misunderstood by everyone watching. What's the last self-help book that spoke so deeply and shallowly at the same time, I think that's a word, about what we value in the 21st century? It's just deep enough that it touches much more than its alleged audible self-help counterparts like You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero and Yourself by Gary John Bishop, but it's not so deep that it's just flat out uninteresting to the average person. What if you think Stoicism and Buddhism and just studying those is just super, what if you find that super boring, but you do kind of find the concept of them interesting? Are you supposed to just avoid them your whole life? What if you need a book like this one just to find them a little bit more interesting and accessible? It's questions like this that make me wonder what it takes for us to realize that these more accessible, more marketable sort of rehashes of original ideas from, you know, the previous century and whatnot are actually beneficial in today's age. I need to come up with a term to describe books like this too. Quotes. We suffer for the simple reason that suffering is biologically useful. It is nature's preferred agent for inspiring change. With great responsibility comes great power. All that we know for certain is what hurts in the moment and what doesn't, and that's not worth much. Direction 1. The author's site calls this book the self-help book for people who hate self-help books, and I think that's an amazing description. If you hate self-help books, I definitely recommend checking this book out. That and anyone who's interested in, you know, stoicism and philosophy and things, a lot of the concepts are really cool, but they find it a little boring when they try to look a little bit more into it. That and someone who doesn't really know what specifically to care about anymore. This book is definitely great for someone who probably has anxiety or depression. I wish I could have listened to something like this when I was 17. Direction 2. If you like this book, I recommend checking out Everything, also by Mark Manson. And if you seriously want to dive into the more practical aspects of this book's philosophies, check out the more recent Laws of Human Nature by Robert Greene. The Subtle Art of Not Caring by Mark Manson. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below, and also let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far. I don't even know how long this review is. This far into my reviews and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch, turn on that notification bell to receive a notification every time I drop a new video. That would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.